Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Oh yeah!
And with that, welcome to Linux and Whatnot, which I believe is episode 8. If you are a loyal follower of the Linux and the Whatnot, you'll notice that we've been gone for like 2 weeks. We've
Right.
just been gone. We had a bunch of cool interviews that were kind of like in the process of getting lined
Yeah.
up, but
Happens.
nobody had time. Like no one we were talking to had time, and then by the time the end of the week rolled around, we didn't have time to scrounge together someone else to come on in at the last second, and so we just kind of pushed it off. But today we've got a really killer one. We've got the CEO of Creative Commons
Woo!
on this show. Next week's show, which I'm not going to talk about yet, is going to be equally awesome, but awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. He's coming on to talk about Creative Commons stuff, which, Matt, we've talked
Boy,
about before. We don't do advertisements on
we
Linux
do
and Whatnot,
not.
right?
We do not.
We don't.
No.
We don't. We don't do them at all. There's no
No, sir.
sponsor of this show or
Nope.
nothing, right?
None of that.
That said, we do have the CEO of Creative Commons on this show, and it just so happens that just recently I released all of my stuff, all of my books about
That's right.
Linux and all sorts of other things under the Creative Commons. And this link right here is my Patreon page. And
Uh-huh.
people can go to the Patreon page. It's still right there. That link is still right there.
It's
And
still
you can
there.
go there. And if you want to see more of those works produced, if you want to encourage me to produce more things like it and make sure that I can afford video camera hardware for this show and whatever I want to do for the books, that is the place to do it. A lot of really cool people. There's like 100 some odd people who have already pitched in over on Patreon who are awesome. Every single one of them is awesome. Are you awesome? I
I
don't
am
know if
pretty
you're
awesome.
awesome. You're
I
you're
think I'm
awesome.
pretty awesome. I think I'm pretty awesome. And I know our audience is awesome. And if you
Yeah.
want to check out what I'm doing, Freedom Penguin, right here.
Is it right there? It's kind of
Right
near
here.
your chin. It's
Right.
right
It's
down
like right
there.
here.
Yeah, yeah. Freedom
Little off
Penguin.
the top there.
Here's the
Okay.
thing. Here's the problem that we have right now. That link that's right down there. It's not
Yes.
really a link. It's a little
No.
speech bubble with a URL because I can't directly link to freedompenguin.com from my YouTube channel.
YouTube.
But if you copy and paste it, you can go to freedompenguin.com, which has like news and reviews and tips and all sorts of stuff Linuxy, right?
Mhm. Very Linuxy.
It's very Linuxy. And we like things that are very Linuxy.
Absolutely.
Delightful. Just plain delightful. Matt, is there anything that you want to tell the entire world right now?
Keep
Anything at all?
watching. Keep watching. And you know what? Share our videos, because when you share our videos, an angel gets its wings, unicorns fly across the sky, and rainbows come flying out of my butt. It's the most incredible thing.
That is a really good point. This show is licensed under the Creative Commons license,
Right.
which means that you can, or a Creative Commons license, I guess there's many of them, but you can take this show, you can remix it, you can re-upload it to YouTube if you want to, with
You
us
can.
saying and doing all sorts of things. You can put little diamond tiaras all over Matt's
Oh, you
head,
can. Horse
which
head.
I think is a really you can put a horse head on his head. I think these are all really good things to do. You could take our all of our music intros for this
Right.
show, you could take them, put them all back to back so someone could listen to one mega YouTube video that's nothing but me and Matt singing
This is
horrible
true.
songs. These are things
Dubstep
that
it.
you could do because we released this show under Creative Commons.
Right.
Anyway, Matthew,
Yes.
sing us into this next glorious portion of the show.
Airwolf.
All right, Matt. We are sitting here with Ryan Merkley, the CEO of Creative Commons. Is it the Creative Commons Foundation? How would you specifically refer to you guys?
We're just Creative Commons.
Creative Commons. It's better anyway. Adding an extra foundation to the end is so like 1990s, early 2000s. Let's go
True.
cut that foundation right off. All right, Ryan, really quickly for the people who don't know you or the Creative Commons, what's the elevator pitch for what you do at Creative Commons and what Creative Commons is all about?
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show, and happy to talk to you. Creative Commons is a global organization and a movement, and we are focused on creating a vibrant, usable commons of materials, knowledge, data, content that anyone can use under simple, permissive terms. Um, The thing that people would be most familiar with are the suite of licenses that we produce that allow people to express their desire to share work under a set of sort of standard offer terms. Things like you may use this work so long as you credit me as the author and link back to the original. Or you may use this work so long as the primary purpose of your use is non-commercial. And those licenses underpin the sharing on some of the largest content platforms you would ever interact with. Things like Flickr, Wikipedia, YouTube, SoundCloud, and so on and so on. Medium now implements those licenses. CC is also actively engaged in a number of advocacy areas around open knowledge, culture, and data. Things like requiring governments that works for the public interest to apply open licenses so everyone can use those works. We paid for them, we should have access to them. Or things like open education, because we believe that education is an issue of access and equity, and freely making that material freely available and producing it collaboratively with the people who use it creates better educational outcomes and creates a more equitable, accessible education world. And the last piece is an example would be open access to research and scientific data. Something like the work that we've been doing to encourage Vice President Biden and the Cancer Moonshot in the US to adopt a policy requiring all research funded by the US government, about $5 billion of cancer research a year, to be openly accessible to everyone, including the data that underpins those discoveries.
That is interesting. I had no idea you guys were doing that. That last bit there, that's totally new to me. And I think I, like everyone else, we know the licenses. We love the licenses. Free culture, rah rah. We're all behind that. But that last little bit, that's kind of surprising to me. How long have you guys been doing that sort of open data in the scientific community sort of work?
So the licenses came into being in 2002, and we have maintained and versioned those licenses 4 times since they were created. The last was the 4.0 license, versioned about 2 years ago. And the big change in that license at that time, which I know this is a bit of a diversion from your question, but
that's okay.
The big change at that time was we went from writing one license for the US and then porting it for each country and its legal context, to writing one license to rule them all, so a single license for the whole world, adapted through a 2-year consultation with our 85 international chapters, and writing one license that works everywhere.
Right.
And it was a huge undertaking. It was controversial, and it was very challenging, obviously, to write one license that works everywhere. But that was the big shift. Around the same time, a lot of discussion was starting to happen around how do we actually realize the vision of Creative Commons, of access and equity and innovation and opportunity, powered by a collaborative commons of creativity and knowledge and data. And it's pretty clear that the licenses on their own don't get it done. Just like building a great piece of software doesn't immediately change the world. You actually have to get people to use it, and you have to
That's weird.
Cause all those things to happen. I know.
Yeah, crazy.
If only a good idea caused everything to just change
instantly.
The right way.
Yeah.
It doesn't. And so CC started to ask ourselves, well, how do we actually get to that vision with the licenses as the basis, now the standard for sharing around the world? With over 1.1 billion licensed works, what's the next piece? And that led us to a new strategy, which we approved last year, around building what we call a vibrant, usable commons powered by collaboration and gratitude. And you start to say, okay, well, where do you do that? Where do you have the most impact in that space? And you run into areas like open education, open data, funding, or the accessibility of public interest works, things like works funded by governments, access to research and the associated data with those discoveries, because that's how open science should work. And so that work and CC's credibility as a brand give us an opportunity to mobilize that international community to do that work. And so we do that all over the world in different communities, from New Zealand to Poland to Canada. We're all over doing that work in various communities.
That's kind of super awesome. Yeah, no, that's incredibly awesome. It kind of sidetracked my brain a little bit, because the stuff I had you on that I wanted to talk about was, the license, and, like if you're really guy releasing, books or whatever under Creative Commons, to talk about things around that. But that's actually really interesting. Let's table that for a moment, because
Sure.
I need to get my head around that completely. Let's come back to the spot. Let's come back to me. Let's make this all about myself momentarily. And I just really would like your thoughts on some of this. All right. So there's not a lot of, let's say, novels and whatnot being written and produced and released under a Creative Commons license. I think it's an increasing amount, it seems like, from someone just kind of looking out at the world. So, like, I've had a lot of conversations with some authors who have, like there's the noteworthy ones, like the Cory Doctorow's of the world, which is pretty much just Cory Doctorow, I suppose, and that have managed to do it and had some level of success with it, and have documented it fairly well to show, how you can release works under Creative Commons. And I recently took the plunge and decided to do the same thing myself.
Great.
I agree. The question that comes back, and a lot of people, once I did this, and I did this like about a week ago, a lot of people came back to me immediately and were like, that's great. We all love this and support this. Free culture for the win into the future. Now, how do you make money again? And it's the same sort of argument that, Matt and I hear constantly in the free software world.
Oh, yeah.
Of, how do you have GPL licensed software and still earn revenue from it? How do you commercialize it in such a way that it funds itself? And, I have plenty of my own thoughts on that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have jumped head first into the swimming pool thinking that there was at least some water in there so I wouldn't crack my head. But I'm curious about your thoughts on it. From what you've seen, how successful have you seen people be utilizing the Creative Commons for works of entertainment, let's say, just to narrow the focus down, because we could talk about textbooks and all sorts of things, but just to narrow the focus, what have you seen so far, and how do you see this going well? Like, what would you recommend people do if you see someone who wants to write the next great American teen love angst vampire novel and release it under the Creative Commons? What's the way to go? Is there a way to go that makes sense to you?
So a lot depends on what your goals are. But I would say if your intention is to become wealthy, I would tell you that writing a book, CC licensed or otherwise, is probably not the best path you could
Probably
choose.
not. It's not the insta millionaire route. Yeah.
No, and I could, the number of authors who retain their copyright who say, I never made any money off my book.
It's a
leads
lot.
me to think that maybe Creative Commons isn't to blame for this scenario.
No,
Exactly.
I think you're probably right about that. But you know what I mean. People immediately. I mean, so the license I chose, just as an example, was the same one that Cory Doctorow went with. So I like, okay, it's free for everyone, but as long as it's non-commercial use, right? So I went that route. And part of it, and I sat on the fence on this. And again, I would love your feedback on this. So I'm like, okay, do I go with the license that says no commercial use, or the license that's just 100% free culture? I put a wreath of flowers on my head and dance in the garden, and anyone can use this for anything. And that there's a very strong part of me that's like, yeah, freedom for everything. Of course people can use it for commercial use. I want that. But then there's this part inside of me that is a scared little boy, and afraid of basically shooting myself in the foot for one of the only opportunities for monetization of it. If I grant the freedom in the entire world for everyone to go off and create their own commercial uses of it, well then there's less of that total pie for my commercial use, right? Now, again, very torn. It's like my body split right down the middle on this one. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on it. Like, how how do you want to see people going? Does it make more sense to have, to have the non-commercial license and the license that allows commercial use, and that people like me should be going one way or the other? What makes sense to you?
So we don't particularly have a recommendation in terms of what license people should choose, and the reason we offer a suite of licenses because each creator has to choose for themselves about what kind of sharing they want to invite and what kind of rights they want to retain. I think it's, I had this conversation with a VC in Silicon Valley. I was down there for a series of meetings, and I went and I had a conversation with him and said, we're putting together this report that we write every year. It's called the State of the Commons Report, and this year we're pretty excited because we're fairly sure that we're going to pass 1 billion works, and that seems like
a lot.
Like a remarkable milestone. And he looks at me straight faced, barely skips a beat, and says, "Is a billion a lot?"
And in comparison to what?
So only in Silicon Valley would someone look you straight faced and say, "Is a billion a lot?" And at the same time, he was absolutely right. It is a fair question because there will be over 500 million photos uploaded to the internet today alone. And the total size and scope of the content that could be open or that is by default closed because of the way copyright works, where it's automatic and it's automatically all rights reserved. Our 1.1 billion works is very, very small compared to the total amount of works available in the world. That said, every single time one of those works was shared, someone like you had to decide to share. They had to make an intentional choice. I wish for this thing to be available. And a choice to apply that license is a massive gift. It's irrevocable. It is licensed that way forever. And you are, in a sense, giving up that massive right to profit, your opportunity to be the next J.K. Rowling. Because you retained your rights to that work, you've given it away to everyone. And so I get that. I get that that's a big gift. And so I think 1.1 billion is a lot because 1.1 billion times somebody chose, yes, I will share, when the default was, no, I will not. And that's a big deal.
That's a big shift.
And so I think the fact that you've chosen to apply that license to your work is fantastic. And I think it's a huge invitation to collaborate and to share. And you said, for all of these uses, I want people to use this work. And I invite them without permission and without restriction to go do this. That's a big deal.
Right.
And you should be commended for that. And we're grateful. I think that's amazing.
Did you hear that, Matt? You hear that, Matt? I should be commended for that.
I definitely think there's some question to how you earn a living with it, but I do think it's interesting.
At the same time, you haven't precluded the idea that you might give that work away under commercial uses. So what you've really said is, if you want to use it commercially,
you got to get hold of me.
We have to talk.
Yeah.
That
is exactly it.
That idea that if you're outside the terms of this license, we could still do a deal. You could still sell your work to a film studio and do a separate license. You could also still change your mind later and make it available.
Right.
There's a little nonprofit called Unglueit, unglued.it. And their model for a while was the author sets the threshold on donations, and then after they pass that threshold, the work is open. And so you say, you know what, I'm willing to make this thing completely open if I can recoup the $50,000 in revenue I might have made had I had a day job for the 6 months it took me to write this book. And at the end and we hit that threshold and the work becomes open for everybody and it gets licensed openly and you're done.
See, to me, that seems tangible. I mean, that seems like something that people can actually pull the trigger on because it's not, they're able to still recoup their costs, potentially even earn a living from that particular thing and then move on to the next thing.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay.
I respect that. What it does is it flips this idea that copyright is a lottery ticket. That everything that you make, every, napkin sketch, every piece of, every drumbeat you put to tape, is an opportunity for you to cash out and be the next J.K. Rowling or Beyonce or Taylor Swift. And the truth is, That's just not the case, and
That's true.
it's pretty much almost never the case. And so we treat
Almost never.
everything as if it was gold when most of it is dust, and that's okay. But it creates a flipped model where nobody people are encouraged not to share for the potential that that work might turn into something magical. But you
And
miss out on the opportunity for other people to make new things from it, or to
Right.
take it further than you might have imagined, or to collaborate in ways that are that are beyond your reach. That
Yes.
and so that's the trade-off, right? Is what do you how far do you want your work to go, and how far do you think you could take it on your own, and what do you think you need to get out of it?
and for
If you
our
need to make a living
viewers,
off it, you may have a very different
sure.
relationship. And I don't begrudge people who keep their copyright and say, I want to keep my copyright and make my living in this traditional way. No problem. I don't begrudge those people, and that's the reason that CC has never really been at odds with the content industries, or at war with them at least, because our licenses are built on top of copyright, and our licenses require the user to choose. And so we're not trying to rob people of their copyright. We're trying to tell people there might be alternative ways. And if you care about collaboration and sharing, or if in certain sectors you think about equity and access and innovation, Open's going to beat that every time.
Makes sense.
And
Makes
so
sense.
that's why we
Right.
do that. I mean, that's why people share code under the GPL, because we know that open and permissive beats closed every time on that kind of innovation. So when
Yeah.
you can find a code base and you can touch it, use it, reuse it, and the terms are simple, people do it. And that's why we have a vibrant open source model, because people get it, they know the terms, and off they go. So I think that's the power of CC, is that baseline, and that simplicity for the user, and the asynchronicity of collaboration.
Hmm.
That I could be a collaborator with you and you would never know, and
Never even
as
know
long
it.
as I follow the terms, then I've honored your requirements, but I've also
Right.
been able to do my own work without constraint, and that's the power. Those who detract around the NC licenses, the free culture advocates, their primary argument is around the free movement of that material, because you've eliminated a bunch of potential uses for somebody.
It is
Sure.
true. I mean, it does limit. So, like, say, I mean, they're probably not going to include my books into a Debian release or something like that. But let's say they wanted to take an EPUB version of one of my books and include it in the Debian release. That could actually preclude it from doing it licensing wise, because of the various downstream distributions they have, and everything else. And so having the non-commercial clause in there does limit it a little bit. Now, it may not be much of a limitation in the broad scheme of things, but it is still a limitation. And so I kind of get that argument. I mean, obviously I still went with the non-commercial version, but I do get that argument. You were talking about like the unglue it, right?
Yeah.
So in my past life, back when I made software, back when that was my thing, is I coded software before I moved over to being a writer and all this other stuff. And I made proprietary closed down software because I was a scared little guy about releasing it as fully open source. And so I did kind of that sort of thing where it's like, okay, if enough people can contribute, if we can set up some sort of a recurring donation system or something, if we can get something in place where I can feel reasonably certain this would have a high level of success, I will open source all the code. And I thought, you know what, this is a good step, right? This is me trying to figure out how to get there and do it. The amount of negative backlash that I saw was intense, and the people who had a negative reaction to it did have a certain level of point. The general idea was that I was then holding source code hostage. I was demanding a ransom for the source code, and I think you guys, or at least some people, have probably seen similar comments along the lines about making it, for a book or a movie or something like that, to say if we reach a certain level of income or donations, we can release into the Creative Commons.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say to that argument, that it's kind of holding the rights hostage? It's holding the source code for ransom. Does that resonate with you?
I'm looking for the name of the author of that great series. Everything is a remix, but that's sort of the fundamentals of that. Kirby Ferguson is the author of and director of a series called Everything is a Remix. And there was a TED Talk, and he's actually repackaged it recently into a single 40-minute video. But the I'll skip to the end and spoil it for you. But the idea is that, unsurprisingly, everything is built on everything else, and the idea that that there are new ideas that live independent of everything that came before them is really, we're just sort of beyond that now. And that's true of code to some degree, and it's true of, certainly true of science, and it's true of of culture, because it is, all culture is derivative even when it's reactionary, because it's a rejection of the thing that inspired it. And all of that is just to say that all new art and culture and knowledge owes a little bit of something to everything that came before it. Not everything. The author produced the work, but it owes a little something. And
it's not done in a vacuum.
Right. And that was sort of the idea behind the idea of copyright terms, and those terms being short, the idea of the public domain, and the idea of limitations that allowed certain kinds of uses, fair use and others. The idea was that, unlike a car or a horse or a sandwich, which you can own, and when I have it, you don't, content doesn't work that way. And that content is derivative in some way or another, in a way that we all own a little bit of it. Except that we've now reached this point where the term of copyright is so perverted that it's, life plus 70 years, so that anything invented, written today isn't going to be in the public domain until all of us and our children are dead. And no one's going to ever want to listen to that or use it for any reasonable purpose at that point. And so I think that there's a conversation to be had about, Creative Commons became, for a lot of people, a release valve, a way to kind of hack the term of copyright and say, well, let's go from life plus 70 to 0. Let's go to right now. It's available, but with simple terms. So now it's available, but you have to credit me.
Yeah,
fine.
Seems reasonable.
And what ends up happening is those who are frustrated, and I don't blame them at all, about this obscenely long term of copyright that keeps so much great work out of the public domain, including works that have been long forgotten and no one cares about. I mean, if there's, for every Taylor Swift, there are 100 million albums that are probably pretty good that no one's ever going to see, that are obscure and in the bargain bin, in the the 5,000 copies the label originally produced, that are never going to get heard. And what life could those works have if somebody found them and used them and wanted to remix them? What could be the potential of them? We'll never know, and they will be ash long before, no one's ever going to listen to that stuff. And so that's disappointing, and a lot of missed opportunity there,
especially for the artist.
Right.
I mean, if you make something great, I mean, so how many? I don't have that many books. I've got less than 10 books, right? So less than 10 books released. A couple of them big, you've done well. They've gotten some attention. When I was selling them just straight up, they sold well. But some of them, no one cared about. A couple of them, nobody read. I don't even think my friends read some of them. And so, but yet I thought they were worthwhile. I thought they were interesting. I still like them. I wrote one basically that was a version of the book of Genesis with robots added in.
Right.
Is there any value to that for society? Maybe not, but I found it to be interesting. And now that it's available for free, and anyone can grab it and remix it and base more fan fiction off of it and extend it, I love that. It has its own life now. It has at least a chance for people to see it and enjoy it and read it, or hate it and make fun of me, but at least have a reaction to it. And before I had a license that I came up with some years back that I called my own license. I called it the Greater Lunduke license. It was a way of me to sell digital goods, but gave people a little bit more rights around those digital goods. And so even though I sold it under a nicer license than what a lot of people get, DRM free and all that, it still was behind a paywall and people weren't going to get to it. And the 11 people or whatever that picked up that book were the only people in the world I could have a conversation with it about. And now Now it's free. And now I've already, in the last week, I know for a fact that a good extra 15,000 or so people have grabbed it. I don't know if they've read it, but they've grabbed it. And that alone is kind of heartening. It makes me happy to know that I make something that people actually might see, which was a lot of my motivation for going Creative Commons. But back to how to earn a living on it, because there is no silver bullet here.
This is just a workshop about your income model.
No. I mean, yes, but realistically, like I get these questions a lot, and I saw, like Cory Doctorow gets these questions a lot, usually in the comments of a blog post or something like that, and so I've noticed it recurring over and over again. It seems like there's a lot of people that just have that fear. There's that fear that they won't be able to squeeze out an income, to scratch it out and make it happen by simply because they're using such a free license on content. Mm-hmm. And so one of my thoughts is to be able to show people, okay, so these methods have proven to be at least somewhat successful to some people some of the time. So at the very least, people can look at a case study and say, okay, theoretically possible, right? Doesn't have to be great, doesn't have to be ironclad, but possible. So like the method I went is I kind of doing the Patreon donation-y thing, right? Because I kind of wanted to remove myself from most sales anyway, so I did that plus like printed book sales, and that's it. And that's kind of where I set it for me, and we'll see how that goes, because it's still early stages there. But from when you've looked at things, when you've had these conversations, and I'm sure you've had lots of them with authors and publishers and content producers, where do you see people going? What approach do you see them taking that you think has the most merit?
So I think it's a fascinating time for the internet broadly and for content industries. I see that you guys did a podcast recently with around tech journalism. And I don't know if the topic, I didn't get a chance to go back and listen, but I don't know if the topic of sustaining journalism came up in there. But there is an ongoing conversation about the future of journalism. There's an ongoing conversation about how artists get paid in streaming media. And there's an ongoing conversation about advertisers, and particularly digital advertisers, and the way they have stepped way over the lines of privacy and kind of invasion, and created this backlash that has the potential to really undermine the way content is funded online, because this rejection of ads and the rise of ad blockers and browsers that eliminate ads is undermining the way that those content industries fund their models. And we're getting to this place where we're talking a lot about how you pay for content, and the way that you should pay for content, and the way I should pay for content, etc. And one of the things that we forget is that through the history of content, we have, I want to say, but I haven't done the research, but I will say we have mostly not paid for content rather than paid for content over the history of content.
If I search my soul, I know that to be true. Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, the 50 cents you paid for the newspaper paid the paper boy, not the writer. It was the advertising that covered that. That was true of the magazine that paid the guy that ran the newsstand. Okay. That was true of, when I pay for the internet, I pay my ISP. That does not cover the cost of you guys producing a great podcast. That covers the cost of somebody shoveling bits through a pipe for me.
Right.
When I pay my cell phone bill, when I pay my cable bill, none of that money actually goes to the people who made the stuff. It's all of that is, I'm paying for delivery. I'm paying for a pipe. I never actually paid the creator. And so this idea that users have always paid for content is actually not true. It wasn't true of radio. It wasn't true of television, especially over-the-air television. It isn't true of the internet. And so by and large, we don't pay for content. There are some exceptions. We paid to see movies in person. We paid to go to the theater. We paid for books. Those things came largely or almost completely ad-free. That's true. But on the whole, it's probably somewhere between 80 and 90% of content we didn't pay for, if you look at everything we consume in a given day. And so we're having this shift to say, this is all user pay now. User must pay. You want to eat that article, you got to buy it. That is a very different model. But I think it's worth noting that we are not just trying to institute an old model on a new internet. We're actually trying to institute an entirely new model of how we consume content, and the internet is implicated. But that means we're talking total economic shift, total new relationships to content. You're asking users to do something they've never really had to do before. And so
It's almost like they have to step outside of their comfort zone. That's the thing I sense with a lot of people, that it's, kind of, you're battling some sense of entitlement. It's always been there. We just get it for free. It's fine. Not realizing perhaps there's overhead costs and things like that have to be considered, and trying to have that conversation, I think.
I think you're totally right, but I also think on the flip side, it's the righteous approach of the publishers. They need to step back for a second and say, "Oh yeah, no one ever paid for this stuff before.
Right.
So let's not act like a bunch of jerks saying, 'How dare you not pay?' Because the predominant system has been, 'I don't pay.'"
Right.
So
Right.
let's actually start from if you would have a very different conversation with me if I had never paid for your thing and then you wanted me to pay for it.
Sure.
You would
Sure.
probably start by saying, "Here's how I do this work, here's what it costs, here's what funds it, and I can't afford to do it if you don't pay. Can we have that conversation? And what would you reasonably pay?" As opposed to, "You pathetic freeloader, how dare you visit my website with your ad blocker turned on?
Yeah.
I hate you." Like that seems like bad consumer marketing in my view. And so
Just a little
let's
bit.
think about that. But also there are these intermediaries that sit between. And so the streaming debate is fascinating to me. I will gladly pay double or triple for a streaming service where on every artist page, it shows me how much money the artist got paid, how much money the label got paid, and how much money the service got paid. You give me that on the page for the artist when I download tracks and when I use that service, I will pay more for that service in a minute, because there is this obfuscation of who got paid. And so I've got, famous artists saying, "I only made $3.95 off 50,000 views," which is an article I saw 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And at the other end, the label made a fortune off that artist.
Right.
And so where is the discrepancy? Who got paid in that scenario? I don't know who it was, but as a consumer, I can't make good choices about who I give my $9.95 a month to if I have no idea whether the artists were ever paid or not.
Right.
And it all feels like a he said, she said.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't be an engaged consumer in that process about whether or not somebody was paid fairly. It's like, now I need fair trade music to have this conversation. The artists were treated fairly.
That should be a
know.
thing. They should have a fair trade music stamp that they could
Seriously.
put on albums you could buy.
I mean,
I would love a system that paid more money for the first 100,000 plays and less money after that, so that it ensured that the people at the bottom of the pyramid could get somewhere close to a living wage, so that they could keep making more music, as opposed to just straight up volume, where one person, then it's less of a lottery ticket and more of us saying music is an ecosystem, and the guy that had an obscure album but was really good probably inspired the person, like all the way up the chain, probably inspires Pharrell to write the next 10 multi-million-dollar tracks.
Yes.
When you ask a pop artist, what are they listening to? They always name some obscure artist who sold 5 albums, and that artist never got paid very much at all and probably never got to make a second record. So why don't we shift the structure and say, maybe we should pay those guys a little bit more at the front end, because we want to value the making and the listening. So there's some front end on the making. All of that is to say this stuff is super complicated. And I didn't answer your question, which is, what does CC think about this stuff? And the one thing that I think is useful is Creative Commons is in the middle of writing a book about open business models.
Oh, super cool. Okay.
And in order to fund that book, we used an open business model. We ran a Kickstarter. We said, what would it cost us to make this book for the staff time and the printing and all of that? And we came out at around $50,000. And so we set ourselves a $50,000 target. We ran a Kickstarter last summer, and we raised $69,000, I think.
Sure.
We're in the top 5% of all book Kickstarters on Kickstarter, which is great. And what we said was, if we meet the Kickstarter, we will make the book CC BY. So the book will be completely open and free for everybody. Now, those people who bought in at $70 or more will get a printed copy of the book signed by Larry Lessig. But
Nice.
the thing that they got was the printed thing. The book will actually be free to everyone. And so the way we did that was by setting up front what's the cost of production. And then once we capped it, we were done. So that book is underway. To answer your question about models, we interviewed and did case studies on 25 different individuals, artists, organizations, institutions. So everything from the Rijksmuseum, which is one of the largest museums in Europe, whose entire collection is CC0, so dedicated to public domain, to the Public Library of Science, based in San Francisco, who do open access science, to Lumen Learning, who are a for-profit company that does open educational resources, where the educational resources are free, but the services of curation and updating they provide for a service as a fee, to Cards Against Humanity, who everybody knows,
Yep.
to Amanda Palmer, who wrote that great book, The Art of Asking, and talking about how she can give her work away. Corey's on that list. Arduino is in there because they CC license their designs.
Right.
Blender, the Blender Foundation, who built that great 3D software. And so Shareable Magazine is in there as well. So there's a whole bunch of them. And so there'll be case studies and also some insights about how do you make an open business model? Can you do it in this model of what we call infinite abundance, where I completely give the work away and let anybody, or do you also always have to have some kind of artificial scarcity? Because all content profit is based on the idea of artificial scarcity, that I create a gate and you get to go through the gate when you pay me,
Right.
whatever that is.
Which actually brings me to something I was going to ask you about scarcity specifically, is that I see that a lot within the TV and movie industry, that there's this implied scarcity of income or scarcity of product, basically, that you're somehow inflicting damage on us, which I've always felt was nonsense, but you're somehow inflicting damage on studios by sharing this content. And I've always taken the mind of, I probably wouldn't watch it otherwise if it wasn't shared with me. So like if I happen to choose to pay for it through Netflix DVD, and I happen to watch it that way versus paying for some ridiculous cable subscription, I feel like that it's more a matter of choices that maybe gets people's minds in the right place for that. Have you ever had that conversation with folks as far as the media scarcity amongst TV and movies? And do you ever see that shifting to more of a Creative Commons model? I think that would be incredible.
I think it's a complex question, in part because there is so much waste on the front end. And so it's not as simple as the Avengers made $11 billion and therefore it's fine because, every actor got paid and so it's fine.
Sure.
Because for every Avengers, there are 1,000 scripts that got bought and never got made, and 100 films that got greenlit that got, started and then bombed, and then, and 25 that they actually put in theaters that lost money. And so the whole model has to pay for the whole model. What's missing is transparency. I have no idea. I'm pretty sure the movie industry is doing just fine.
I've always got that sense, yeah.
So I'm not super worried about the movie industry. And Corey does a good bit about how, in the face of DRM and piracy, the most profitable year for the movie industry was last year, and the second most profitable was the year before that, and the third most profitable was the year before that. So all things being equal, movie industry is doing just fine. Yeah. Now, the movie industry might argue we could be doing more fine if there wasn't so much damn piracy.
Right.
And yet, there's also some interesting research that says that all that downloading makes people more excited and makes them go buy the stuff anyway.
Right.
There's also a whole bunch of data that suggests that if they spent less time chasing pirates and more time finding a way to do deals so that the content I want where I live in Canada wasn't accessible to me only by VPN through the US, then maybe I would just pay for it in Canada. And all of the data says if you just give people what they want at a reasonable price, they will gladly pay you for it. Exactly. And I think that's the story of streaming and iTunes and all of that, which was once they stopped rejecting the idea that MP3s existed and started accepting the idea that users wanted their content digitally, Shazam, it was possible, right? And the same thing has happened for TV, and the same things happen for movies. And so I think it's way too complicated to say it's this versus that. I would say people, as a general rule, are happy to give their money for stuff if you give it to them the way they want it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Generally, that seems to be the sense. And they would prefer if you didn't make it turn into ether when you switch devices, which I would really appreciate as
Yeah,
well.
that would be delightful. Well, all right. So the movie industry, looking at it from this point of view, let's say Avengers Civil or Captain America Civil War comes out. The movie, the production company says we're going to release this under the Creative Commons license, right? We're just going to go full out. We'll add the NC clause in there so it's non-commercial use, but you can still download it, use it. You can take it, remix it. You can do all sorts of cool things where Captain America is, dancing with My Little Pony or whatever you want. Here's the cool license for it.
Yep.
If the movie production studio does that, in your mind, what's the way that they earn the revenue when it's under that license? Do they would it being under that license and so freely available, make it so it was harder for them? Like how do you view it?
If they released it under an NC license?
Yeah.
Oh, I think they wouldn't have much trouble profiting off that. People would still want to buy DVDs. You wouldn't be able to get it on the streaming services without having deals there. They'd be able to take it off YouTube. And so what you'd really be enabling is non-commercial remix and derivative works, which really fun. And I don't, if you
Really
haven't read, if you haven't read Cory Doctorow's Pirate Cinema, which is basically about this, then I really encourage it. It's a really fun book, and there's a lot in there about making new narratives out of other content. What I would love to see, since we're talking about Disney, is I would love to see Disney put the prequel trilogies from Star Wars under an NC license.
Oh, please, yes.
As a gift to the fans to say, we're very sorry. We know that they're an abomination. We know that they ruined your childhood.
Here's
your opportunity to make your own and share it back with the world. And they could still, with every one of the good ones that were made, repackage them and do the Star Wars fan edit with the best ones that they made available and sell them, and people would buy them in droves.
I think you touched on it because it's like Disney's got the distribution channel. The average Joe on the street that did the remix doesn't. So Disney gets to still profit from someone else's work. That's a beautiful thing.
Right.
Now, what if dialing it back a bit? Let's say that you're Kevin Smith, just starting out, right? You're about to make Clerks for the very first time. How do you foresee, because I completely agree with everything you just said, how do you foresee that working for someone just starting out? So like in Kevin Smith's case, he shot Clerks for I think $20,000, managed to sign a deal with Miramax, got a real under the radar release, but it managed to catapult him up to awesome stardom, right? So from the releasing it under a same sort of license, under an NC license, how would you foresee that working in your mind? I mean, is that still a viable way to go for Kevin Smith's just starting out?
It's a tricky one, and how do people find what causes somebody to make their way and to get noticed? And Clerks is, I just looked it up, like $27,500 off 23-year-old Kevin Smith, right?
Yeah.
Shot it in actual, in Jersey in the actual like convenience store. Was it Miramax that did that? Was the distribution wide enough for the cult following that ultimately followed? And what year was that movie? Was that like 1994? There was no internet to speak of, right? So that there was nowhere to find that thing. You weren't going to download it.
Exactly.
So I think in that sense, he got noticed because he made a great film and he had a gift for dialogue. And none of it I can actually quote on this podcast since it's all pretty blue.
Yeah. There's no need. Everyone watching this probably knows some of the lines anyway.
Totally.
Exactly. But I think with each creator, they have to figure out what it is they're after. And what does the license as a tool get you? Does it get you collaboration? Does it get you wider use and reuse? Does it give back to or enable a certain kind of use that you want to have in the world? Do you really care about your stuff being used in education? Or do you really care about other filmmakers building on top of it? Or are you making music and you want it to be the soundtrack of various videos? One of the things that was really fun that we did last year, we worked with YouTube to help them build a CC licensed audio library in the YouTube authoring tools. And so if you're making a YouTube video, YouTube will offer you audio that you can use with permission in their works. It's all CC licensed. It's inside the platform, so you don't have to go anywhere to get it. And if you're a creator of CC licensed audio, you now have the opportunity to have your works credited, linked, and attached to YouTube videos. That's a great way to get noticed. Is it a great way to make money? No. Is it a great way to make your name? Yes. And so, as with all things, you've got to decide, like, what is the benefit that you want? What is the value that you want to create with your work? Money is just one kind of value you can create. There are lots of other kinds of value you might choose to create. And sometimes those things come with trade-offs. So you chose the NC license for your book. There's a bunch of value you're going to get to create because schools can use your book or because people can read it on their own non-commercially. But there's other value that you chose to keep for yourself because, if somebody wants the movie rights, they're going to have to do a deal with you.
Right.
I think it's
Which
fine.
I should point out that movie rights to my books would be the most ridiculous thing in the entire world. They would make literally the worst movies in the history of humanity. But I like the idea that someone might try one day.
Sure.
So Creative Commons really hasn't been around that long. It feels like it's a mainstay in our culture for us, but we're in the free software side of things. I mean, people like myself and Matt were the natural proponents and supporters of what Creative Commons have been doing. So it feels like you guys have been around forever, but really it's just not that many years, really. I mean, realistically, where is it going over the next couple of years? I mean, where does it go from here? I mean, you guys have made huge strides. Is it going to be more focused on more of the science and education side of things that you guys were talking about, which is amazing? Where does it go?
Depends on how long, what constitutes a long time for you. So we'll celebrate 15 years since the licenses were created next year. I was just watching a video yesterday of Aaron Schwartz demonstrating the newly designed CC website in 2002. He was just a kid. He could barely see over the podium, and he was presenting the website which he had designed and the chooser for selecting your license. It was great, and bittersweet to see. But we have a good history, and you're right. We're also in the grand scheme of things, we're pretty young. But we came into being before the social internet. We came into being before the data-powered dynamic web. The world changed a lot. And CC's technology has not changed dramatically since then. So it's an area that we've been working on to focus. I talked a couple of times on this discussion about a vibrant, usable commons powered by collaboration and gratitude. So the next phase of our work is about saying, how do we do that? How do we light up that 1.1 billion works or 2 billion or 5 billion, whatever it will be over the next number of years,
right?
And make it so it's easy to discover, easy to use. What would it look like if there was no click attribution instead of copy and pasting markup, which is what you have to do right now? Right. What would it look like if there was a front door to the commons? If you could come to search.creativecommons.org and find a catalog of every openly licensed work, and be able to use it and access it and link out to the platforms that host that content and find it. So we're building that right now.
That would be kind of amazing.
So we're building that right now. The internal name for that project is the Open Ledger, and CC Search will be built on top of it. We hope to have a prototype by the end of the year. That's new work for us. We've never had a software team inside of CC. And so we're going in that way. It's really fun work, but I also think it's exactly what we need right now in the Commons. Is to make it more usable and more vibrant. And then we're also working with our platforms that host the content. 3/4 of the commons, if not more, lives on mostly startups and private industry that created their own commons hosting. So Flickr is over half the commons is on Flickr. You've got Wikipedia, you've got SoundCloud, you've got YouTube, you've got Public Library of Science, you've got all of these different platforms that are hosting the commons. And so the user experience of CC actually lives over there. It's not my website. It's inside all of those applications and platforms where people are experiencing the content. So we need to work with them in almost like a B2B way to help improve the user experience, to help them drive engagement, to show them why there's value in having the commons and having CC licensing inside their platform. So we worked with Medium this last year to do an implementation of CC licensing in Medium. And I met with the editor-in-chief at Medium at the time, a guy named Evan Hansen, who was once at Wired and is now running Periscope, and said to him, why did you guys do this? Why would you want to implement this? He said, because our users expect it, because they want to share. And as long as that's true, then I think there's a bright future for the commons. I think that there's a lot of opportunity if people still want to share. I think we're the platform that makes that simple and possible in a really easy to use legal framework, and lets people go from all rights reserved to some rights reserved quickly and easily and without cost. And that's the idea, but that's what unlocks access and equity and innovation through sharing. And that's why we're doing it, and that's what we're up to.
I think what's exciting about Creative Commons is that it's a platform that allows you to not only pay it forward if you choose to, but even from a selfish point of view, you can actually leave legacy after you've departed this earth. I mean, strictly just from a, being remembered point of view, it's kind of cool. We're going to remember Brian for his books,
I don't know that that's the right thing to remember me for, but yeah, I get your point. Yeah.
As one example, but, or the podcast or anything else. Sure.
I'm going to remember that shirt too. That's a pretty good shirt.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Beach Squatch, absolutely.
Yeah. Who are you wearing today, Ryan?
Oh, I don't know. I'm wearing whatever was in my closet between there and my office.
Actually, I got this shirt here. I don't mean to divert too much, but my mother was in town recently, and because she is my mother, she likes to show up with a shirt.
Sure.
She showed up with this shirt. My mother can't see very well, I think. There are topless ladies all over this shirt. You can't. I'm thinking you can't really tell too much right now, and it just looks like little things. But I can't really wear this shirt out, so it's very comfortable though. But yeah, so I'm wearing some unknown designer who. Yeah, has little cartoon topless ladies. I didn't realize it at first. But anyway, Ryan, you guys are really doing awesome work. I really do appreciate everything you guys are doing, and I really want you to keep it going. If people are interested, what's the best way people can help out? What's the best way that people can help the Creative Commons be even more radical going forward?
So two things. I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't fundraising 75% of the time. So Creative Commons is supported entirely by philanthropy and by donations from regular people, thousands of people just like you who support our work. And so creativecommons.org is the place where they can make a donation to support our work, and we're very grateful. But I think the biggest gift that you can give to the Commons is to choose to share. And so if there is a thing that you think could be beneficial to the wider world, then I'd encourage you to share it and use a CC license. I'd likely embed it in a platform that you already use, or you can get those licenses from our website, also at creativecommons.org, and encourage people to do that. We're a global organization. We have affiliate chapters in 85 countries around the world. There are very likely people wherever you are that are trying to do this kind of work, whether it's open access or open education or copyright reform, and you can connect with those folks also at our website. And we're happy to continue to build the movement and make new friends.
Awesome.
And on that note, Ryan, I have one final question for you.
Yes.
What's your singing voice like?
I'm a baritone. If that's
cool.
Fantastic. So on this show, we don't use any outside music for a variety of reasons. So at the beginning of the show, one of myself, me or Matt, sing an intro theme song, and we make it up on the spot sometimes. Sometimes we plan it ahead, but no, actually, we never have planned it ahead. We just sing an intro theme song. They're terrible. They're truly terrible. And then we offer the opportunity for our guests to sing us out. Ryan, would you like to sing the outro theme song for an episode of Linux and Whatnot?
I really wouldn't, but I thank you so much for the invitation. It's so kind of you to offer.
Fair enough.
You know, it's funny. So when we